The night my son opened his dream lounge without me was the night I stopped being the family bank. I did not understand that truth right away. At first, all I knew was that I was standing alone in my quiet kitchen, staring at the worn tiles beneath my slippers, waiting for a photo that never came. It had been an ordinary evening, the kind where the house hummed with the same soft sounds it had made for years. The refrigerator buzzed. The clock over the pantry ticked steadily. The world seemed unchanged. Only I was about to learn how wrong that was. I had called Brandon, my son, the same way I had called him 100 times before. He did not pick up the first time, or the second. When he finally answered, the noise behind him was unmistakable music, laughter, clinking glasses, the bright roar of celebration. Before I could speak, the line shifted and a different voice slid smoothly into my ear, warm on the surface and cold underneath. "Hi, Edward. It is Marissa, my daughter-in-law, always polite, always calculating." I smiled automatically, the way parents do when they are relieved to hear a familiar voice. "Marissa," I said, "is Brandon around? I have been trying to check the date for the opening. I want to make sure I am there early. You know me. I will wipe tables, take pictures, embarrass him a little." There was a pause, a long, airy pause that cut through the music in the background. "Oh, Edward. The opening was last night." I switched the phone from one ear to the other, as though that would make the words sound different. "Last night I thought it was just a soft opening. You did not give me a date yet." "We kept it small," she said calmly. "Very intimate. Only important people, investors, a few media people, people who could help the business. Important people." The phrase slid into my chest like ice water down my spine. I waited for the joke. It did not come. Brandon said nothing. I could hear him breathing faintly behind her, the way he used to when he was a boy caught trying to lie about something harmless but impossible to hide. I pictured him rubbing the back of his neck, staring at his shoes. Marissa continued, brisk and bright. "Do not take it personally, Edward. We will do a family thing later. Anyway, I have to run." "Customers." The line cut off. I stood there in my small kitchen, holding a silent phone. Outside, the streetlights were flickering on one by one, casting pale gold on the sidewalk I had shoveled for Brandon when he was 10 and delivering newspapers. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses its hands against your ears. Only important people, only people who mattered. I looked around my home, the photos on the wall, the knitted blankets my late wife Eleanor had made, the dent in the dining chair where Brandon used to swing his legs until she scolded him. Memories stared back at me, and none of them felt important to the people celebrating that night. I walked to the fridge and touched the old magnet that held up a faded drawing Brandon made in 2nd grade, a stick figure Dad holding his hand, a lopsided sun, huge smiles, important people. I sat down slowly at the table and folded my hands. For years, I had answered every call from them without hesitation. "Dad, we are behind on rent. Dad, the equipment broke. Edward, the supplier doubled the price. Just this once. We promise we will make it up to you." And every time, I found a way. I pulled from retirement accounts. I delayed repairs on the house. I sold things that still mattered to me, but I was not important enough to stand in the room when they cut the ribbon. The thought settled like a stone in my stomach. I tried to shake it off. I tried to tell myself I must have misunderstood, that maybe they really had meant no harm. But the words would not leave me. They sat inside my head like a slow, spreading bruise. I made coffee I never drank, turned on the television but did not watch it. The night crawled on, long and heavy. When at last I sank into my recliner, the one Eleanor had patched twice, I stared at the blank screen and listened to the hum of the house. I wondered when exactly I had become invisible to my own son. And worse, I wondered how long I had allowed it to happen. The house creaked when the wind picked up outside. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, and I sat there in the dim light, the phone beside me, waiting for a message that never came, waiting for a son who never thought to send one. That was the moment something in me began to shift, though I did not realize it yet. The first quiet fracture in a life I had held together for far too long. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Marissa's voice echoed back at me, sweet as frosting and sharp as a needle. Only important people. As if the years I spent scraping, saving, sacrificing, never placed me in that category. As if being a father counted for nothing once the bar lights came on. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up pretending I could rest. I stood, joints aching, and walked to the old cedar cabinet where I kept documents Eleanor had told me never to throw away. Insurance forms, old bills, tax papers, bank statements. I placed everything on the dining table and sat down under the soft glow of the bulb that buzzed faintly every few seconds. Some people say clarity comes in the morning. For me, it arrived in the stillness of that night, in the hum of the refrigerator and the brittle rustle of aging paper. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and uncapped a pen. That simple act felt heavier than it should have, like I was preparing to write the record of my own mistakes. "Let us see," I whispered to myself. "Let us see how unimportant I have been." I started with the biggest expenses, the down payment on the lounge lease, the first loan I guaranteed, the emergency $4,000 when the contractor walked out because Brandon had not read the agreement carefully, the money for the liquor distributor, the replacement of the sound system, the new furniture. Every time Brandon or Marissa said it was urgent, every time they said the business would collapse without immediate help, I had reached for my wallet. As I wrote, the list grew longer, stretching down the page, then onto the next, until the pad began to feel too thin for everything I needed to put on it. Then came the smaller things. The gas money when their car broke down. The groceries when they said they were eating canned beans to save the business. The phone bill when Brandon claimed the company line had to stay active for reservation calls. Little cuts taken so casually from my life that I had stopped noticing the sting. But here, in the silence, every cut reopened. I kept writing. There was a 2,800 transfer I barely remembered approving. I searched the documents, but the authorization form was missing. I frowned. Had I misplaced it? Not likely. Eleanor always teased me for keeping things too organized. Had it ever been given to me at all? The longer I searched, the deeper the unease settled. Mary, the bank clerk, had once mentioned a digital authorization for a recurring payment. At the time, I brushed it off as something Brandon must have asked me about, and I forgot. Now I was not so sure. Then I found something that made me stop breathing for a moment. A transfer for nearly $900 labeled Maintenance Emergency. I remembered no such emergency. The date landed right around the time Marissa had mentioned a malfunctioning cooler. She had said she paid for it with her own savings. That was the night she had hugged me tightly and told me she was grateful for all I did. My hand trembled as I wrote the number down. I kept flipping through the papers, and with every page, more small but suspicious expenses appeared. Charges that were vague, charges without receipts, transactions that did not match the story I had been told. Was it possible they had been using my account without my knowledge? Maybe I was mistaken, or maybe the truth was something I had been too blind to see. By the time the first hint of dawn turned the window pale, my list stretched several pages. When I added the total at the bottom, the number made my breath hitch in my throat. 44,800. More than I had imagined. More than I should have ever allowed. More than Brandon and Marissa had ever acknowledged. I sat back in the chair, exhausted, staring at the total until the ink blurred. I felt no anger then, just a hollow ache, an emptiness that stretched deep and wide inside me. How had I allowed myself to slip into this role, this invisible benefactor who never questioned, never pushed back, never asked for respect in return? Outside, the sun began to rise, pale and soft against the clouds. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance, oblivious to my unraveling. I rubbed my temples and leaned back, letting the morning light fall across the pages. This was not just about the money. This was about how far I had strayed from the life Eleanor and I had once dreamed of living in our later years. A life I had slowly traded away piece by piece without even realizing it. As I flipped through more papers, a loose envelope fell from the stack. It was addressed to Brandon, but inside was a copy of an invoice paid with my debit card. The handwriting on the signature line was not mine. It mimicked my strokes well, but not perfectly. Whoever had signed it had rushed the curve of the letter H in Hale, flattening it unnaturally. For the first time in years, a cold thread of fear wound itself around my heart. I looked around the room and felt a shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable. This was no longer a matter of a grateful son who lost his way. Something else was embedded in this story. Something darker. Something I had ignored for too long. I closed the envelope slowly and placed it on the table as though it might explode. The truth was no longer avoidable. Something was very wrong. And I had only begun to uncover it. By the time the sun rose fully, my mind felt scraped raw. The house looked different that morning, as if every corner now held the echo of a truth I had avoided seeing. I pushed myself up from the table, gathered the papers, and placed them carefully into a folder. I needed answers, and the first place to find them was the bank. The walk there felt heavier than usual. The air was cool, the streets quiet, but something in my chest thudded with a slow, tight rhythm. I had been coming to this bank for nearly 20 years. I knew the tellers by name. They knew my habits, my appointments, even my stories. There was comfort in that familiarity. But today, even the familiar felt foreign. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," the young teller greeted with a warm smile as I approached. "You are in early." "Yes," I said. "I need to see Mr. Franklin if he is available." "Of course. Let me check." A few minutes later, I was walking toward the glass office in the back, where Mr. Franklin stood to shake my hand. He was a calm, steady man in his 50s, with glasses that always slid too low on his nose. "Edward," he said with genuine concern. "Everything all right?" I sat down slowly. "I need to review all accounts connected to my son's business and to my own transfers. Everything. No detail left out. And I want to cancel any automatic payment or protection linked to them." He studied my face, then nodded. "All right. Let us take a look." He typed on his computer, the clicking keys echoing sharply in the small room. I handed him the folder of papers I had brought, and he flipped through it, occasionally glancing up at me too. When he reached the page with the suspicious emergency payment, his brows knit together. "You said you do not recall authorizing this." "No," I said quietly. "I certainly do not." He clicked into another screen, scrolling. After a moment, he inhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. "Edward," he said, "this electronic authorization did not come from your device." I felt the back of my neck prickle. Then, from where he hesitated. "It appears it came from a login associated with your son's business account. Same IP as their lounge registration documents." The words stung sharper than I expected. "Meaning," I said, my voice barely above a murmur, "someone signed off, pretending to be me." "It would appear so," he answered gently. I exhaled slowly. I should have felt anger, but all I felt was an immense, crushing sadness. Years of trust collapsing in a single sentence. "Let us continue," I said. He nodded and opened another screen. "Do you want to keep overdraft protection for their business account number? Remove it. And the automatic transfer every first of the month, stop it entirely. And the CO-signed credit line. Cancel my guarantee. Today." He paused. "Edward, canceling this means they lose their safety net." I met his eyes. They should not have had one to begin with. He nodded again, more firmly this time, and continued working. Click after click, the chains around my finances loosened. For the first time in years, the weight of their needs lifted from my shoulders. Another notification popped onto his screen, and something in his expression shifted. He enlarged an image, turned the monitor slightly toward me. It was a photograph. A man in a dark suit, smiling beside Brandon at the lounge opening. "Do you know him?" Mr. Franklin asked. I leaned closer. The man looked familiar. Sharp jawline, short-cropped hair, an expensive watch. I had seen him before. "He visited this bank about 8 months ago," Mr. Franklin said. "He was reviewing your son's loan file. But he was not from here. He was a consultant brought in by someone else. I remember because he asked unusually specific questions about your retirement accounts." A cold shiver worked its way through me. Why would someone connected to my son's business be interested in my retirement? Mr. Franklin frowned at the screen. "I should not speculate, but it is strange that he appeared at both places." Then he clicked again. Another screen popped up. "Sir, there were 2 attempts last month to access your online banking from the same IP." "From the business account, yes." My stomach tightened, a slow spiral of dread. I had not realized the scope of what I was dealing with until that moment. This was not just irresponsibility, not just carelessness. Something more calculated was stirring beneath the surface. By the time Mr. Franklin finished the last cancellation, my hands felt cold. "Here are the printouts," he said, placing a stack in front of me. "Every account is now secure. If anyone attempts to reconnect anything without your authorization, we will contact you directly." "Thank you," I murmured. As I left the office, sunlight streamed through the lobby windows, but it did nothing to warm me. On the way home, I made a choice I never imagined making. I took the long road that passed the lounge. Its exterior gleamed with fresh paint and a glowing sign. New furniture, new heaters, the warm haze of lights inside. Then I noticed the flyers taped to the windows promoting their opening night. I leaned closer. There, in one photo, behind Brandon and Marissa, was the same man from the bank, the so-called consultant, standing comfortably at their side. My breath caught. Something dark flickered in the back of my mind. What exactly had my son become involved in, I did not know. But I knew one thing. I blocked their social media accounts on my phone, not to punish them, to protect myself. The walk home felt quieter than ever, but not peaceful. Not anymore. There was a storm coming. I could feel it. And for once, I was not stepping aside to let it pass. I was preparing to face it. The storm arrived sooner than I expected. It came pounding at my front door late the next afternoon, not with fear or hesitation, but with the kind of entitled urgency only people who believed you owed them something could muster. I did not move at first. I stood in the hallway, listening to the sharp, impatient rhythm of the knocking. 3 hits, a pause, 3 more. Then Brandon's voice, muffled by the wood but unmistakably agitated. "Dad, open up." I took my time walking toward the door. When I finally pulled it open, he pushed inside without waiting for permission, brushing past me as though my home was simply an extension of his own. Marissa followed, arms folded tightly against her chest, her eyes already scanning the room like she was measuring which part of my life she intended to take next. She did not greet me. She did not even attempt politeness. Her expression was cold, her jaw stiff with contained anger. "We need to talk," Brandon said, pacing in small circles near the dining table. "Dad, why would you cancel everything without telling us? Why would you open your lounge without telling me?" I replied quietly. He stopped pacing. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a moment, he looked like a little boy again, caught in a lie. But the softness vanished quickly, replaced by the defensive edge he had learned from his wife. "That was different," he muttered. "That was business." Marissa stepped forward, voice sharp. "This," she said, gesturing between us, "hurts us. Do you understand that the automatic transfers were essential? The overdraft protection kept the business stable. Now we are in a crisis." Her tone made the word crisis sound like an accusation. "What kind of crisis?" I asked. Brandon rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, we are behind on supplier payments. Payroll is due. Some equipment repairs came in higher than expected." "How much?" Before Brandon could answer, Marissa lifted her chin. 3,000. We need it by Monday." 3,000, I repeated softly. "And why is that my responsibility?" She scoffed, incredulous. "Because the lounge is our future, and Brandon is your only son. You cannot just walk away when things get difficult." "He is my son," I said evenly, "but that does not mean I am his bank." Marissa took a step closer, the way someone approaches a wounded animal they wanted to force into a corner. "Do not make this dramatic, Edward. We are a family. Families help each other. You know that. And you have always helped." "Exactly," I said. "I have always helped." I walked to the dining table, reached for the folder I had prepared, and pulled out the pages of calculations I had made the night before. I placed them in front of Brandon. "This," I said quietly, "is what I have spent on your business. Every transfer, every emergency, every time you said you just needed a little push." He picked up the pages, scanning quickly. His face drained of color as the total at the bottom solidified in his mind. "Dad," he whispered, "this cannot be right." "It is." I kept records. Every dollar. 44,800. Gone. And until last night, I never once asked for anything in return. Marissa snatched the papers from him, her eyes narrowing as she skimmed through them. "Some of these were gifts," she insisted, "and others were necessary expenses." "Necessary for whom?" I asked. "You two or me?" Her jaw clenched. "Edward, please. If the lounge collapses now, it will be your fault." My fault, I repeated softly. Because I refused to give more money than that is all I am worth to you. Brandon looked torn, but he said nothing. Then something unexpected happened. As Marissa shifted her stance, a slim folder slipped from her bag and fell to the floor. Papers scattered across the tiles. She knelt quickly, gathering them, but not before I saw a printed headline across one of the top sheets. Petition for temporary financial guardianship. My breath paused. My entire body went still. I bent down slowly and picked up the form before she could snatch it away. My hands trembled as I held it. You were going to file this, I said, looking straight into her eyes. Even before I cut the money. Even before the lounge opened. Brandon swallowed hard. Marissa tried to speak but failed. For once she had no script, no polished line to hide behind. I straightened, holding the document like a piece of something toxic. Get out of my house. Brandon blinked. Dad. Wait, no. I stepped aside and pointed toward the door. Whatever you two planned, it ends here. Get out. This time there was no hesitation, no plea. Marissa grabbed Brandon's arm and pulled him toward the door, her face a mixture of fury and fear. As they stepped out, Brandon turned back slightly. Dad, we just needed help. I shook my head. Then you should have asked for help, not control. I closed the door behind them, the sound echoing through the quiet house. For the first time in years, I felt the smallest spark of something I had almost forgotten I possessed. Strength. The house felt eerily quiet after they left, as if every sound had retreated into the walls, watching, waiting. I stood in the center of my living room for several minutes, listening to my own heartbeat settle. The document in my hand felt heavier than paper should ever feel. A guardianship petition. A legal attempt to declare me incapable, powerless, voiceless. The realization pressed down on me with a slow, choking weight. I placed the folder in the drawer of the cabinet where Eleanor used to store the Christmas tablecloth, then locked it. I wished the lock brought comfort. It did not. I slept badly that night, waking at every noise. A car passing, a branch brushing the window, my own breath catching in the dark. By morning, the unease had carved itself fully into my chest. The first sign that something was wrong came while I was pouring coffee. A white truck pulled up in front of my house. Two men wearing gray shirts and clipped badges stepped out and walked toward the side of the house. I watched them through the window, frowning. Can I help you? I called out as I walked outside. One of them nodded curtly. Gas shut-off order for this address. That cannot be right, I said. My bill is on autopay. He shrugged, tapping his clipboard. Overdue balance. We have to proceed. Something in his voice, that dismissive flatness, crawled under my skin. Let me see the order, I said. He showed me the document, and my stomach tightened when I saw it. My name, my address. But the overdue balance was not mine. The account number belonged to a business line I did not recognize, and the service address listed beneath it was not my home. This is not my account, I said firmly. Do not touch anything. I am calling the company. I dialed customer service and waited, pacing the small patch of lawn. When someone finally answered, I explained the situation. The representative checked my account. Sir, she said slowly, your gas account is in perfect standing. There is no shut-off order. Then where did this come from? I asked. Let me check the log. A moment of keyboard tapping. Sir, This request came from a linked account associated with a commercial customer. The name matches a business license registered to the Ember Hollow. My heart went cold. The Ember Hollow was Brandon's lounge. I ended the call with trembling hands and walked back toward the two men. "You have the wrong order," I said. "Cancel it." "Dispatch says hold," the taller man said, already turning back to his truck. "Probably a system mix-up, but I knew it was not. It was an attempt, a small one. A test, a warning shot. As their truck pulled away, the weight of what was unfolding pressed deeper. My own son had tried to cut my gas, my utilities, my basic security, all because I drew a boundary. Inside, the house felt colder than before. I made another call immediately, this time to the utilities office directly. They were apologetic, confused, and promised to lock my account against external changes. I thanked them and hung up, but the reassurance felt fragile, too easy to break. By noon, the second sign arrived. An envelope in my mailbox. No return address, thin paper. I tore it open. Inside was a stack of overdue notices printed with my address but referencing vendor accounts from the lounge. Liquor suppliers, equipment rentals, marketing fees. My name had been handwritten on each envelope as if I were responsible. My fingers tightened around the papers. This was not coincidence. It was pressure, a push to frighten me into giving in. I threw the entire stack onto the table and stepped away. And still, it did not stop. That evening, I logged into my online banking to double-check my accounts. The password did not work. I tried again. Wrong. Again. Wrong. Again. Locked out. I sat there in the glow of the screen, feeling the coldness spread through my limbs. Someone had attempted to change my login. I called the bank immediately. They confirmed multiple failed access attempts, all originating from an IP address tied to a local business network. The Ember Hollow, again. "Sir," the representative said, "we recommend changing all passwords and setting two-factor authentication. We will mark your profile for manual oversight." "Thank you," I said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. That night, sleep did not come easily. I lay awake listening to each creak of the floorboards. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps. Around 2:30, headlights flashed through my curtains. Slow, lingering. A dark SUV idled in front of my house for nearly a full minute before rolling away. Something in me broke at the sight. A thin thread of fear, quiet but persistent. What did they want? What were they willing to do? At 8 the next morning, another knock echoed through the house. This time softer, hesitant. When I opened the door, I found a man in uniform standing on the porch. "Morning, sir," he said. "I am Officer Grayson. We received an anonymous concern about your well-being. A wellness report." I exhaled, the sound sharp. "Let me guess. Someone said I was acting confused or erratic." His expression shifted. That was the general wording. I stepped aside. "Come in. There is nothing wrong with me." He entered and looked around slowly, taking in the clean room, the organized table, the neatly stacked documents. We sat at the dining table beneath the amber morning light. "Tell me what is going on," he said gently. So I did. I told him everything. The lounge opening, the money, the forged authorization, the guardianship petition, the gas shut off, the banking attempts, the SUV outside. He listened without interrupting, but the tightness around his eyes grew with every detail. When I finished, he nodded. "Mr. Hale," he said carefully, "you are not confused. You are not unstable. You are not vulnerable. You are being targeted. The words settled heavily between us. And I have to warn you, he continued. When people get desperate for money, for control, for power, they do not back off. They escalate. A chill hollowed my chest. So what do I do now? I asked. Be cautious. Document everything, and do not open your door to them alone. As he left, the morning sun spilled across my porch, warm and bright. But all it illuminated was the truth I could no longer ignore. This was no longer a disagreement, not even a family conflict. This was a siege, and I had only just begun defending myself. 2 days after Officer Grayson left, the world finally delivered the blow Marissa had been preparing from the beginning. I had just finished watering the small row of potted plants on my porch when a white sedan pulled up in front of my house. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out, carrying a thick packet and a clipboard. Her expression was professional, polite, and entirely empty. "Mr. Edward Hale," she asked. "Yes, you have been served." She handed me the packet, had me sign the acknowledgement, then walked away without a single additional word. No explanation, no sympathy, no hesitation. She had delivered this sort of devastation too many times to bother with kindness. I closed the door and locked it, then stared down at the heavy stack in my hands. The top page hit me like a hammer. Petition to declare the respondent mentally incompetent. Respondent: Edward Martin Hale. Filed by Brandon Hale and Marissa Hale. A long, cold breath escaped me. My knees felt weak, so I sat at the dining table and began reading page after page. The deeper I went, the worse it became. Exhibit A listed supposed erratic behavior, sudden financial decisions, paranoia about family motives, isolation, personality changes. All lies, all strategically worded, designed to paint me as unstable. Exhibit B contained statements from people I barely knew. A neighbor I rarely spoke to claimed he heard me yelling at no one in the yard. A clerk from the drugstore somehow signed a statement saying I was confused picking up medication. A family friend I did not recognize said I often seemed disoriented. Their signatures looked tense, rushed, as if someone had pressured them. But it was Exhibit C that made bile rise in my throat. Evidence of financial mismanagement, unexplained withdrawals, suspicious spending, failure to maintain household responsibilities, allowing unsafe individuals into the home. Unsafe individuals. They meant Officer Grayson. They meant Mrs. Howard, who visited me with cinnamon rolls. They meant anyone who tried to help me. And then the final twist. A medical note, allegedly from a clinic I had never visited. It claimed I had displayed memory issues, difficulty following instructions, and signs of early cognitive decline. My hand shook as I traced the signature at the bottom. I did not recognize the doctor. I was certain the note was forged. By the time I reached the last page, my chest felt tight, my breath shallow. Requested action. Full guardianship over all financial, legal, and medical decisions. Requested guardian, Brandon Hale. Secondary guardian, Marissa Hale. They wanted everything. Not just my money, my house, my identity, my autonomy, my ability to sign a check or choose a doctor. They wanted to own me. Something inside me hardened. I picked up the phone and dialed the number Officer Grayson had circled for me. A law firm. When the receptionist answered, I could barely get the words out. I need an attorney. Right away. Within 2 hours, I was sitting across from a dark-haired woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Her name was Ms. Laverne. She read the petition slowly, her jaw tightening, her expression darkening with every page. "This," she said finally, laying the papers down, "is not just unethical. It is calculated. And it is criminal." "Criminal," I repeated quietly. She nodded. "Yes. This is textbook exploitation. The forged medical record alone is grounds for investigation, and the financial claims are fabricated to justify seizing your assets." I swallowed, my throat dry. "What can we do?" "First," she said, "we gather everything. Bank statements, receipts, messages, logs, every shred of communication. Second, I will request an immediate independent evaluation. We need professional proof you are mentally sound. Third, we prepare for court." Her eyes locked onto mine. "And fourth," she added, leaning forward, "you do not speak to your son or his wife without me present. They will try to manipulate you. They will escalate. They always do when they realize their first attempt failed." I nodded slowly. I understood. Ms. Laverne continued reviewing the documents, pausing when she reached the loose medical note. She lifted it by the corner like something contaminated. "This doctor," she said quietly, "is not licensed in this state." My heart dropped. So the entire thing was forged. "Worse," she added, flipping to another page. "Your daughter-in-law has done this before." I stared at her. "Before?" "What do you mean?" She pulled up a record on her laptop. "Years ago, Marissa had attempted to obtain temporary guardianship over her elderly aunt, claiming mental instability. The petition failed, but the details were sealed in a settlement. It never reached prosecution. But the pattern was clear. She has practiced this," Ms. Laverne said flatly, "and now she is using it on you." A chill worked its way through me. I felt decades older in that moment, not because of age, but because of betrayal. "What happens now?" I asked. She closed the folder with deliberate finality. "Now, Mr. Hale, you let me fight for you, but you need to understand something. People who go this far do not stop easily. You must be cautious. You must be prepared." I nodded again. The weight of her warning settled deep into my bones. Before I left, she handed me the card of a licensed psychologist and instructed me to schedule an evaluation immediately. 2 days later, I sat in a quiet office across from Dr. Preston, answering questions, recalling dates, following instructions with clarity and calm. When he finished, he looked at me gently. "Mr. Hale, you are not only completely competent, you are exceptionally lucid. I will put that in writing." Relief washed through me, but only for a moment. Because beneath it was something else. The understanding that this battle had only just begun. The morning of the hearing arrived wrapped in a strange kind of silence. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence. The kind you feel in your bones before a storm breaks. I had woken before dawn, showered, and put on the suit I had worn to Eleanor's funeral. It felt like armor, familiar and uncomfortable all at once. As I adjusted the collar, I studied my reflection. I did not see a confused old man. I saw someone who had been cornered and finally chose to stand up straight. When I arrived at the courthouse, Ms. Laverne was already there, standing near security with a coffee in hand and a posture that radiated calm authority. "You ready?" she asked. I took a breath. "I am." "Good. Because they are here." I turned. Brandon stood at the end of the hallway, shoulders tense, eyes darting. He looked smaller than I remembered. Marissa stood beside him, perfectly composed in a charcoal dress, lips pressed in a practiced line of concern. Their attorney hovered near them, the same man who had once visited my home with that syrup-coated tone of fake compassion. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors, and we stepped inside. There was no jury, no audience, just the judge, a stern woman with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the file in front of her before lifting her gaze to the room. "This is a petition for guardianship filed by Brandon and Marissa Hale," she said. "Let us begin." Their attorney stood first, painting a picture of a fragile, declining old man. He spoke of confusion, impulsive finances, unpredictable behavior. He spoke with a softness meant to disguise the claws beneath. He described me as though I were a ghost wandering through my own life, unable to manage anything. Then he called Brandon. My son walked to the stand slowly, hands trembling just enough to evoke sympathy. He looked at me only once, then focused on the judge. "Dad just is not the same anymore," he said. His voice cracked strategically. "He forgets things. He makes strange decisions. He isolates himself. We are scared he will get hurt or make a mistake he cannot take back." It was a performance, but a practiced one. Then came Marissa. She lowered herself onto the witness chair with a solemn grace. "Your Honor," she said softly, "I love Edward. Truly. But he is not well. He told us people were conspiring against him. He accused us of stealing from him. He misinterprets everything. We just want to protect him." Every word from her mouth was wrapped in honey and poison. Then a parade of their so-called witnesses followed. A neighbor claimed I shouted in the yard. He conveniently forgot to mention the fake utility workers. The pharmacist admitted he signed something, but the opposing attorney twisted his words until they painted me as forgetful. A man I had never met swore I rambled incoherently during a conversation that had never happened. For a moment, a seed of fear crept up my spine. What if the judge believed them? What if everything I had built, everything I had fought to reclaim, vanished with a single signature? Then it was our turn. Ms. Laverne walked with calm precision to the center of the room. The defense calls Dr. Preston. He testified with crisp, unwavering professionalism. Edward Hale is mentally competent, fully aware, capable of managing finances, medical decisions, and daily responsibilities. There is no sign of cognitive decline. A shift rippled through the courtroom. Next came Officer Grayson. He described the fraudulent wellness report, the suspicious activity around my home, the baseless nature of the concerns filed against me. Then a representative from the utility company testified. The shut-off order came from a commercial account associated with the Ember Hollow. Marissa's jaw tightened. Next, the bank manager confirmed the unauthorized electronic authorizations and the multiple attempts to access my accounts from a business network. The judge's eyes sharpened. But the moment everything truly shifted was when Ms. Laverne called an unexpected witness, a man I did not recognize at first. He was tall, nervous, clutching his hat. "This gentleman," she said, "was approached by someone offering him money to sign a statement claiming Mr. Hale appeared confused in public." The judge's head snapped upward. The man cleared his throat. "It was her," he said, pointing at Marissa. "She told me it was for a family emergency. But when I hesitated, she said she would find someone else who would not ask questions." Marissa's face drained of color. Brandon looked at her, shocked, realizing for the first time that the person he trusted had gone far beyond anything he understood. And then came the final twist. Miss Laverne held up a photo taken at the lounge opening. "Your Honor, this man standing beside the petitioners is currently under investigation for financial misconduct. He had previously reviewed Mr. Hale's accounts without authorization." A cold silence filled the room. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I walked to the stand, heart steady. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply told the truth. The money I gave, the love I offered, the betrayals that followed, the gas shut off, the forged documents, the late-night fear, the quiet desperation. When I finished, the courtroom felt painfully still. The judge folded her hands and stared at Brandon and Marissa for a long, unbroken moment. It was the kind of silence that stripped a person bare. Her decision was coming, and this time, it would not be theirs. Judge Harrington lowered her gaze to the documents spread before her. She tapped her pen once, a sharp sound that cut through the silence like a blade. "I have seen many guardianship petitions in my career," she said. "Some filed out of genuine concern, others filed out of fear, and a few filed out of something far more troubling." Her eyes lifted, steady and unblinking. "This one belongs to the last category." Marissa swallowed hard. Brandon looked frozen, as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. "The evidence presented by the petitioners is inconsistent, unsupported, and in several instances demonstrably false," the judge continued. "Furthermore, multiple attempts to interfere with Mr. Hale's utilities, finances, and well-being have been confirmed through testimony and documentation." She turned another page slowly. "The court, therefore, denies the petition for guardianship in its entirety." My breath escaped in a shaking exhale. Miss Laverne placed a hand lightly on my arm, a gesture of restrained triumph. But the judge was not done. "Additionally," she said, her voice sharpening, "this case will be referred to the Office of Elder Protection for review as a potential attempt at financial exploitation and fraud." Brandon's head snapped up. Marissa's face blanched to a shade so pale it was nearly gray. "This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck, one firm crack. A sound that felt like a door closing and a chain breaking all at once. As the bailiff called the next case, people began filing out. Brandon approached me slowly, shoulders slumped, eyes wide with something between shame and disbelief. "Dad," he said quietly, "I did not know she did all this." I studied him for a moment. I believed him, but belief did not erase the damage. "Brandon," I said, "you chose not to look. Sometimes that is worse." He lowered his eyes. "I am sorry. I truly am." I nodded, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. "Your life is yours to rebuild," I said. "Mine is finally mine again." Marissa lingered several feet behind him, her expression shuttered. For once she had no words, no calculated charm, no smooth lies. Her world had cracked open in front of strangers, and she knew it. She turned sharply and walked away without a single glance back. Brandon followed her, though much more slowly. As they disappeared through the courthouse doors, I felt something in my chest loosen, something that had been clenched for years. A kind of freedom, a kind of mourning, a strange combination of both. Weeks passed, and the world grew quiet again. Quiet in a different way, a peaceful way. I sold the house. It was not an easy choice. Every inch of it held memories of Eleanor, of simpler years, of a time when being a father meant bedtime stories and scraped knees. Not legal battles, and forged documents. But I knew it was time. I moved to a small apartment near a long stretch of walking paths along the water. Sunlight reflected off the surface each morning, turning the world gold. I found comfort there. I joined a seniors art group, something Eleanor had always encouraged me to try. I started painting, at first awkwardly, then with a strange, blooming clarity. Colors became a new language. Quiet became a companion instead of an enemy. One afternoon, a letter arrived. I recognized the logo on the envelope immediately. Not from Brandon. From one of the investors of the Ember Hollow. Inside was a simple note. Mr. Hale, we discovered recent irregularities in our financial audits. We wanted to thank you for protecting yourself. It helped expose issues we would have overlooked. We hope you are well. For a moment, I sat with the letter in my hands, absorbing the quiet truth of it. Protecting myself had protected others too. That evening, I stepped onto my small balcony, paint still drying on the canvas behind me. The sky was streaked in orange and violet. A soft breeze carried the smell of water and pine. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For years, I had believed love meant sacrifice without limit. I had believed family meant saying yes even when it hurt. I had believed that being needed was the same as being valued. But now I understood the truth. Love without boundaries becomes a weapon. Sacrifice without balance becomes destruction. And being needed is not the same as being respected. I opened my eyes, watching the sky shift colors. My name is Edward Hale, 68 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am mine. And that, I realized, was the lesson I had nearly lost everything to learn.